She was the ship of dreams, an example of modernity and extravagance. The RMS Titanic was a headliner of her day, and yet we remember her not for a presumed successful maiden voyage, but for a disaster that would resonate for over a century. These are the stories of the men and women of that eventful evening on April 14th, 1912. These are the heroes that put others before themselves in the midst of great tragedy. Past Access Did You Know presents Episode 1, Titanic Hero, Second Officer Charles Lightoller. Hello and welcome to Past Access DYK. I'm your host, Pete Coleman. Tonight we have our very first episode on our special edition of Past Access DYK, The Titanic Heroes. Now, the Titanic had many heroes. Some of the heroes we'll never know of, they're lost to history, and some of them we have some information on. We'll examine the heroic efforts of those individuals connected to the ill-fated Titanic disaster on April 14th, 1912. We will shine our spotlight on the heroic efforts of lead stoker Frederick Barrett, ship bandleader and musician Wallace Hartley, American philanthropist Molly Brown, Baptist minister Reverend John Harper, junior wireless operator Harold Bride, and tonight's subject, Titanic's second officer, Charles Lightoller. The leadership of Charles Lightoller was many years in the making. You see, he was a naval man through and through. He worked his way up through the ranks on various ships, and once assigned to the majestic RMS Titanic, he must have thought he reached one of his career pinnacles. Charles Herbert Lightoller would be named second officer by the White Star Line and serve under Captain Edward John Smith, known to many as the Millionaire's Captain. Little did Lightoller realize on this maiden voyage that his life and that of his crew and passengers would hang in the balance between life and death on that eventful morning of April 15th, 1912. This voyage was to be momentous for this White Star Line crew. Some of the era's more affluent and celebrated persons were booked across the North Atlantic from England to the eventual destination of New York City. The RMS Titanic was a ship of dreams designed by Harland and Wolff. 52 tons of the more recent naval design advancements and top-of-the-line engineering, not to mention the thousands of hours of artisan craftsmanship, all geared for the most luxurious voyage to date. Failover watertight compartments, 2 reciprocating 4-cylinder triple expansion steam engines with a combined output of 30,000 horsepower, comfortable steerage berths, modern second-class accommodations, and a peerless first-class experience not rivaled by any other liner in 1912. Titanic had it all. Well, maybe not all. Remember, she set off with a sparse amount of lifeboats, which would prove to be a fatal flaw that would cost many, many lives. But such thoughts of disaster were far from the minds of the passengers and crew, leaving Southampton on the 10th of April, 1912. We'll step aside for a moment, but upon our return, we'll take a look at that fateful night on April 14th, 1912, and our hero, Charles Lightoller. So stay tuned. Next time on Past Access, our next adventure highlights the capital of Tuscany, known as Florence, the birthplace of the Renaissance. Once the epicenter of medieval European trade, finance, and artistic expression, Florence provided an unrivaled influence across the continent and gave birth to the era known as the Renaissance. This 14th century awakening from the late Dark Ages moved art, technology, and humanist expression to all new heights. We make a wish at the El Porcellino, check out the amazing artistic collection at the Uffizi Museum, push across the ever-crowded Ponte Vecchio, and marvel at the majesty of the Duomo. We will introduce you to the Florentine greatness of Galileo, Michelangelo, Dante, Da Vinci, Brunelleschi, and of course, the Medici family. All this and more on Past Access presents Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance. On the night of April 14th, Lightoller completed his duties on the bridge and was relieved by First Officer William Murdoch. Clear skies and an unremarkable sea lay in front of the Titanic. Lightoller completed his rounds and adjourned to his cabin. At around 11:40 p.m., he felt a disturbance in the ship's motion, but it was slight. Soon after, he was rushed out of his cabin with word that the Titanic had hit an iceberg. His first reaction was to go portside to prep the lifeboats and then report to Captain Smith.
Portside boats all swung out, sir. Shall I fill them?
Yes. Put the women and children in and away.
Aye, aye, sir.
As the hour wore on, more and more passengers reported to the deck in life vests. By 12:45, just over an hour since the iceberg ripped through the Titanic's hull, lifeboat number 7 is lowered. Then 5 minutes later, boat number 5. At first, the order is given, women and children only. Lightoller was worried that anxious passengers would be problematic on the lifeboats as they were lowered to the sea. He allowed these first sets of boats lowered partially filled. As events progressed, Lightoller, as well as the other White Star Line officers, tried to keep things orderly. To be certain that the lifeboats were being lowered properly, he made his way down a stairwell to sea deck, where he was met by seawater filling the stairwell. This was his awakening that the ship would founder and there would be a strong need to redouble his passenger evacuation efforts. The eventual tragedy was starting to really take shape. By 1:45 a.m., things became very tense, as Lightoller still stuck to his interpretation of Captain Smith's order of women and children only. Lifeboat number 2 was about to be lowered. With the lifeboats dispatched, there would only be the collapsible boats left. Several washed away with the rising water as the men tried to hurry the unlashing of the remainder canvas boats. By 2 a.m., Titanic had only 20 minutes to live. Sinking quicker by the bow, the cacophony of crashing dishes and groaning steel plates were very noticeable. The water then washed over the portside collapsible B boat, and soon after, Lightoller was in the icy waters himself, reportedly fighting off the shock from the freezing cold waters that felt like 1,000 knives in his body. Lightoller survived being sucked under twice as air pockets from the ship drew in floating debris. He would notice the collapsible upside-down boat floating nearby, and he swam toward it with other survivors. Just as he got to the boat, Titanic's number 1 forward funnel crashed into the water, crushing some, but washing Lightoller away. In his next attempt to reach collapsible B, he was successful and climbed on top the overturned boat. It was 2:10 a.m., and Titanic's lights would go out. Within 10 minutes, the RMS Titanic would slip forever below the waves. 30 other men hung onto the boat for dear life, as Lightoller managed to keep the boat from tipping over with his constant weight-shifting orders for balance.
You all right? Lean right. Steady.
By the break of dawn, the overturned collapsible boat B was met by lifeboats number 4 and number 12, Lightoller taking command of lifeboat number 4 until rescued by the ship Carpathia. In the end, only 712 survived of the total 2,208 on board. The immediate aftermath of the sinking of the Titanic was a circus of newspaper editorials and sensational interviews, as well as U.S. congressional hearings, not to mention a British naval inquisition that would follow. The second officer, Charles Lightoller, would be later criticized as being too much of a company man and not saying anything too damning about the White Star Line. But nonetheless, his summation of events was at the heart of the final report of the disaster. Lightoller mostly presented a measured account of the events, as well as the most famous retort to a loaded question on why he did not go down with the ship. Lightoller would famously reply, "Sir, I did not leave the ship. The ship left me." Lightoller would continue his naval career with the White Star Line on the RMS Oceanic, and through the Great War years served in His Majesty's Navy and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and promoted to Lieutenant Commander. However, many felt his career trajectory was hampered by his connection to Titanic's disaster. He retired from naval duty in the interwar years, but his calling to the sea would never die. He soon purchased a motor yacht vessel named the Sundowner. This boat and her captain would go on to rescue 130 stranded British soldiers from Dunkirk in 1940.
So at 7 o'clock I met him down there, he said the Admiralty were going to requisition her for going over to Dunkirk. They wanted me to take her round to Ramsgate, where they said that a naval crew would take her over. I told them that they had another guest coming. If anybody was going to take her over, well, my eldest son and I were.
You may have remembered this adaptation in Christopher Nolan's 2017 film, Dunkirk, whereas the factual character of Lightoller was scripted to be the fictitious Mr. Dawson. All of this was just adding to an already historic and admired life. Charles Lightoller was a man of mark. Lightoller would succumb to chronic heart disease on the 8th of December, 1952, reaching the age of 78. Charles Lightoller had a stellar naval career. Even though those events on that April night in 1912 would destroy many careers, he kept going. That night in 1912 would never leave him. He was in charge of an impossible situation, doing the best he could, and helped save many lives that night. Charles Lightoller's name would forever be linked with the RMS Titanic. And so now you know. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's special presentation of DYK, Titanic Heroes. There'll be more of these to come in future episodes. If you want more information to track our progress on Titanic Heroes or our other shows on DYK, go to pastaccess.com. So until next time from Prague, I'm Pete Coleman. Have a good night.
This has been Past Access Did You Know with Pete Coleman. For more information on this topic or other DYK shows, please visit us at pastaccess.com. Be sure to visit our Past Access YouTube channel, like and subscribe.